With Clint, in the beginning, we started by just reading the book and getting some ideas. We met together and just discussed sort of what the style might be of the filmmaking and what the style of the movie would look like. It mostly was about look and feel of the movie, emotional feel of the movie. I went around and checked out the different facilities, and Digital Domain just had a great photorealism going.
He knew we did a lot of digital water and digital terrain. We had a series of meetings with the rest of El Paso Productions, and they looked at a lot of the work we had done and made the decision that we'd be the best fit for the film.
From the beginning, this movie was going to be a very, very photorealism type drama, and the less the audience was aware that they were watching a movie, the more successful it would be, and both Clint and I completely saw that. And in that sense, the visual effects had to be completely seamless and perfect relative to the audience being completely unaware that there were any visual effects in this movie at all.
The good thing is that there was the amount of reference material available. There was such a wealth of documentation on war footage specifically. Everybody's seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures of what World War II looked like. So we knew we couldn't get away with any cheats, be it the water or the terrain that we needed to create, or the people, obviously, needed to be so photoreal.
Action!
Clint has just like all directors, they have a unique shooting style, and Clint's is very appropriate for especially this movie. And I just didn't want to interrupt that flow. He's very prepared, he's very studied, and then he wants to be very spontaneous on the set. That's sort of counterproductive to visual effects oftentimes.
He shoots like a jazz musician. He just kind of gets out onto set. You know generally what the setup is, but he decides on the spot how it's going to play out. That's kind of tricky for a big visual effects movie.
An example would be shooting in real locations instead of on a blue screen set.
Clint also felt that it sets a tone if you're working with blue screens, and that type of visual effects environment takes away a little bit from the spontaneity and the tone that is set while they're shooting.
We would have been interrupting Clint's and Tom's photographic style. It would have been a big hindrance to their maneuverability.
If something was shot on blue screen, you could very easily pull a key on it and composite it with whatever background you needed to. All of a sudden now we're going to have to do a lot of rotoscoping, which is time-consuming and very tricky in some cases.
So here we have an example of the production footage in Iceland. In this case, we're in Mount Arnafell, which is to represent Mount Suribachi at Iwo Jima. The reason for choosing to do this was that we gave Clint and the actors a great spot to be able to feel and interact as if they were on a mountain in a war zone, but obviously the background is not. So literally every single frame, somebody had to break these guys out of their foreground environment so we could add a new background to the shot. This is the final composite. Obviously, it's quite different than what Iceland looked like.
Can't stress enough about how hard this rotoscoping is. We probably spent many, many months on, like literally, just on separating the foreground out from the background for the obvious payoffs. But talk about the elements that are in the shot. Here we obviously have computer-generated water in the background. Everything is synthetic in the background, in fact, including the island. The island is part procedural 3D, like mathematics, creating the geometry, and part of it is paint touch-ups. And there's millions of little minutiae going on here, little explosions, little burning debris in the background. I mean, we even have people stepping off the ships down at the bottom that you don't even really see, but you sense activity. So an intense amount of work in the background and an intense amount of work separating the foreground from the background.
This environment also made for a very quick shoot for Clint so that he could keep moving forward without having to worry about what the background and all the actions are for the layout of a shot and how it should play out.
Go, go, go! Move it! Go, 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 go!
In trying not to be invasive into Clint's style and change what Tom and Clint are trying to accomplish, we need to know where everything is in the real world that we're photographing. We needed a way to make sure that we could fit into that world at any given moment. So we set up a bunch of marker balls on the set. They're markers that you measure the distance between them on the set, so you know exactly what those are. And in the 3D space in the computer, we match that those balls so that we know now we know exactly where the spatial relationships are in that given shot.
Once the material starts getting turned over to us, the integration team take the plate that was shot and create a digital environment that matches that live action plate. Some of the other teams that are involved are the lighting team, making sure that as we are rendering whatever digitally, be it the water or the tanks or the soldiers, as we put them into the scenes, they are lit in the same way, whatever lighting was on that particular day. There are some shots where you don't see it dimensionally change, or you don't see it in perspective change. And so we had the ability to do large, what we call pan and tile matte paintings, which you're creating an oversized photoreal matte painting using real photographic elements and creating a large matte painting that you can then zoom in on and go to different areas and put into the background of a plate. One of the benefits of that is it takes less time to render. If you have a large 3D element in a final composite, that's going to take a long time to render and process. So matte paintings are helpful to get you through work quickly.
The physical effects that Steve Riley was doing, they were going to be the first front of trying to get it done. And because time obviously is money, their reset time is always significant, so we decided that we'd be prepared for 2 reloads. At that point, we could evaluate what we need to take care of in post.
We'd shoot 1 take or 2 takes of pyro, and that's all we're loaded for. And this is what we turned it into. Same shot. There's the before, there's the after. So what we've done is we've added a great deal of pyro because it would have taken way too long to do this on set. And we've also added suribachi in the background, and we have planes, and then we just enhance sort of the color and tonality of the shot to give it much more of a war setting rather than a sunny sort of situation.
Some of it's pretty obvious, but some of it is not. There are, of course, many more CG characters. You can see them in the background here. There's the plate version, live action people, but then we need to have people actually get hit. We didn't want them to get hit in real life. To make it a bit more scary, we got little strafing hits right on the heel of the feet, but that was a key point, is to be able to embellish the shot, but make it fit in with everything that was shot for real.
Originally, Clint, Rob, and I scouted Iwo Jima thinking we were going to film there, and/or that we were going to need to do something to photograph those for backgrounds or whatever. As it turned out, that became not necessary, and we decided that we would build suribachi and everything else in the computer and make a virtual Iwo Jima. So that entire island, the mountain and everything, including the ocean and the shorelines, the sand berms, all this was modeled and manufactured in the computer.
We knew we needed to do a lot of water terrain, beaches and thousands of people on beaches, and the vehicles that were on the beaches, and the land itself. All of those things you can do development on prior to getting the material. It would have been very, very difficult, if not impossible, to do all of that character animation the traditional way. So there is a software package called Massive, which basically you create a brain, and it's a huge tree, a chain of decisions that the software considers. What this enables you to do is then take a plate of a beach, for example, that we have now created digital information for, populate it with 400 soldiers, and then just say, okay, run it and see what the software does. It's a learning process because you don't want them to be bumping into each other. There's decisions that you've given them. To make it very simple, they've got 5 options. You can also create a sound for them to react off of. So if there's a sound, they can either duck, dive down, get on one knee, or whatever variation of decisions we've created. This enables you to very quickly get through animating a large group of characters.
The only watercraft we had on the project that we used to photograph were a relative handful of landing craft. We borrowed the Iceland's Coast Guard once to put a couple of signatures in the water, but other than that, all of the watercraft are manufactured in the computer. And they do Digital Domain does a great job of just modeling and texturing and painting and lighting these myriads of ships. A lot of research goes into it to get photo accurate. It's hopefully a tasteful representation of the historic events, because one of the things, again, in looking at all the historical photographs and the style that Clint and Tom and I all agreed that this is where we're headed, is let's make it look like war footage, or war correspondent footage.
The shot that we have is a completely virtual shot. It was completely manufactured in the computer, so none of this exists in real life.
When you have a shot that's fully synthetic like this, it's always a little scary because you've got nothing to really leverage believability on. In a case like this, you really got your pants down sort of thing. You need to make it that much better.
We started with a real island that is fully foliated, and then we had to distress it as if it was bombarded for 3 months ahead of time, which was what the case was with Iwo Jima. So you start with a fully foliated island, and now you have to sculpt it exactly to some of the details of the moment in the scene.
Okay, so this is a better example of water, but you've seen this sort of thing before, and this isn't showing the shoreline water, but what it is showing is the beginnings of aeration, the bubbles under the water that are generated by all these different landing craft. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of landing craft, and obviously you wouldn't want to do that by hand.
You've got the shoreline cut in and all the surf that's going on there. There's also what we call amplitude and sort of the frequency of the ocean and the waves and all this other stuff. All that is controlled to give you dynamics of what the ocean should look like. Again, whitewater interactive around where the ship's going to go. Got the water bombs represented here, all synthetic. The ship starts coming in. Oftentimes in the past we would mix more of a live action, meaning we would go and photograph an explosion and then cut this in. And today it's because of the development and the accuracy of being able to create this in the computer, your lighting will be exactly the same as it should be for all the other elements. We've added a foreground aircraft cockpit. That cockpit has, a canopy, and you have to add schmutz and all kinds of stuff to it. We've added the background war sort of residue of smoke, and a little more detail in some of the ships and stuff like this that are back there. So here we have the final composite of a virtual made shot, completely in the computer. All the elements that went to it each contribute a little notch of further enhancement to make it more believable. Every little nuance in there you work on to make the appropriate level of believability. And you could work forever on a shot like this, but obviously there's a limit to time and money. So you stop where you feel like it's working very, very well. And in this case, I think it worked well at this level.
Working with Clint is great. He believes that it's a collaborative effort and people do what they do. And within that structure, in my opinion, you're able to accomplish a great deal more. He's very good with the notion of visual effects. He leaves most of that to me, and I prefer that so I don't have to mess with his style. I can predict fairly well what his cinematic style is, and I think that's one of the great things that all the people around him do well, is they know what he's trying to accomplish.
There's just an enormous trust, and I think that's generally how Clint works. He hires good people, and they need to work hard, but he trusts them to do what they were hired to do. And I think that makes people want to do a better job. People didn't want the project to be over. They wanted to come to work every day and just create great-looking imagery.
I think in any project, you're hopefully going to get one of several things. It's either going to be a great movie, there's great work that you did, you learned something, you made some money, or you had fun. In my experience, it's rare if you get 2 or more of those. And I'm getting 5 on this one.